Okay, are you ready? Are you set?
Yes.
We have a wonderful treat for you tonight. And it's a wonderful treat for a couple of reasons. Okay, so this is a long-standing series now that we started 5-6 years ago, of bringing every year to a semester outstanding winners in the field of entrepreneurship. People that have had an impact. And we try to make it such a variety of people that you can understand the concept of entrepreneurship. It can't be something you point at and say, there's one, that's what you have to be. They're all different. Everyone is different. We've had people here from a kid at 13 started his first business, and at 17 in high school sold his 5th business for $1.5 million. And I loved it with my audience then, all you kids. I couldn't resist saying, so, you guys are 20, 21 in college, what the hell you been doing? Here's this kid, 17, he just sold his 5th business, so what have you been doing sitting around? We've had billionaires here. We've had social entrepreneurs here. Tonight we have a wonderful entrepreneur who represents a whole different sector that you guys never think about. I've known this guy for a number of years. He sat on the College of Business, Dean Wolahan's Business Advisory Council for a number of years, helping out the university. Was wonderful at that. It's been very good to us. I always tell you guys, the way I measure an entrepreneur is that they throw the rope back over the wall to help the next generation come along. They help the next folks to make it. Well, he's doing that with the College of Business. He's been wonderful, wonderful in helping us out. So, he's in a business that you guys probably would never think of as a business, because you all think about, oh, I'm going to start a sports bar. Oh, you're not supposed to make a business out of your hobby. You're supposed to pick something serious where you won't drink up all the profits. But he went into what a lot of times we call business to business. He served a niche industry. He found a need. He found an opening in an industry and became, in a 20-year period, started from scratch, started from zero. In a 20-year period, he became the biggest supplier of fireplaces to the home construction business in America. Now, it's a marvelous niche business that we wouldn't always think of. He figured out, hey, they don't have any nice fireplace suppliers, or if they do, I can do it better. And he did it, and he was terribly successful. A little bit of background. He started out many years ago. I didn't say too many, did I? Did I say that with too much emphasis? Many. That was a small many. Yeah. With Arthur Andersen in the accounting field. When Arthur Andersen was the king of the hill, the finest company there was in the field. So he was the best of the best as a student, did very well working for others, and then found his place in life being a wonderful, wonderful entrepreneur. I'm going to have you give him a quick hand here, but I'm not going to let him talk yet, because I want to give him his award as the Conrad Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur, which is a wonderful award where we recognize people that have had an impact on the world, and the second half of it is they must have also done good for the world. Not just made money or not just sold 50 million fireplaces and all that sort of thing. They have to be somebody that's conscious of doing good for society. And Mike Ricci is that. And I will also tell you this, he's a damn tough accounting type. Ooh, I sat on a little board with him, and this guy can spit it out. I gotta tell you, he can figure those numbers fast. I love accountants, you know. I look at this stuff and I say, that looks pretty good. He's saying, what do you mean? This is terrible. You gotta do this. And he ran me into the ground. So I give you Mike Ricci and give him a hand for a second. But you can't talk yet. I love telling accountants to shut up. Michael is getting a wonderful award that I hope some of you guys come here. I'm planning on living to 903 years old, so there's plenty of time for you. I'd love to see some of you guys up here someday winning something like this, the Conrad Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur Award. Let me read it to you. It says, the Conrad Hilton Distinguished Entrepreneur Award, celebrating entrepreneurial excellence, exceptional achievement, and powerful leadership, presented to Michael Ricci, a creative, dynamic, and powerful entrepreneur who found a powerful niche for his OEM fireplace business and became the largest selling fireplace products manufacturer for the new housing construction industry in America. Since retiring, he has applied his entrepreneurial power and ability to ensuring that the next generation of entrepreneurs are properly educated and stimulated with real-life practices and networking opportunities. Give the man a hand. He's I'll put this up over here. As you leave, and he's through, I want you to just drop by there and see how good your picture and your name would be on this someday. And I will tell you, why not? Why not?
Well, that was a bit overwhelming. There's lots of successful entrepreneurs, so I don't want you to think I'm one of a kind or unique, or the few that you met are unique. There are a lot of them. There are literally thousands of them in this country and around, and more than that in the world. And the other thing I know about entrepreneurs is most nations can't exist without them, because it's the entrepreneurs of the country that provide the wealth that allows the country to do all the things it wants to do. Those countries that stifle the environment for an entrepreneur also stifle the success of the country. There's three things about entrepreneurs that are kind of fascinating. One is they are certainly risk takers, they are certainly decision makers, and they're very passionate about succeeding. And I wish you'd take that away with you, because it's that passion that really makes it work. In my case, I started a long time before you did, and I was born during a time when there was a Great Depression. And so when I was a teenager, the notion of going very far was get your high school diploma and then get a good job. As it happened, after I got my high school diploma, I went into the Air Force, got shipped off to England, and learned a new culture, which was like a great new education. Got married there, came back to the United States, and got discharged in Las Vegas, Nevada. When I was discharged, I was a father, and I decided, well, my wife really decided, that I would go to college, which was a big thing for me, and that we'd do this in the state of California. I also decided I wanted to go to a Catholic university, and Loyola was the first one on the list. I hitchhiked down here to take the exam to get in, and I hitchhiked back too, as a matter of fact, and I did get accepted at Loyola. So that was a wonderful thing for me, because I got a wonderful education here at Loyola. At the time that I went there, the requirements were a bit different than they are today. We had to take a lot of philosophy courses, and those were really very helpful. As a matter of fact, I had decided to become an accountant, and I had more units in my philosophy courses than I did in my major. But they really taught you how to think. When I got out, I joined Arthur Andersen, and then the second phase of my great education began, because I had 9 years with them, and I learned a great deal. It was about that time that I began to realize that just getting a good job was not the end of it, it was the beginning for something else. When I left Arthur Andersen, or maybe I should tell you how I left Arthur Andersen, that might be kind of a cute story. I had a client, I had been shipped and transferred to Washington, D.C., and I had a client that was this New York Stock Exchange company, and we had just finished the audit, and I told the partner, since I was a manager at the time, I had to sign off with the partner to give them the certificate or the opinion letter, and I refused to sign the opinion letter. He said they were doing their accounting wrong, and that needed to be corrected. And the partner went berserk about it. In fact, he was literally shocked. So we ultimately ended up with the home office of Arthur Andersen working the problem out, and we then moved forward from there. And then I wrote a 57-page memorandum, which we normally did after each engagement, recommending to the management what they ought to do with the company. And the partner read that, came up to my office and said, it's one heck of a memorandum, but we are not going to give this to the company. And I said, why not? He says, because your writing here says the chairman doesn't know how to run the business. And I reflected on that for a few moments, and I said, well, that's true, he doesn't. And when I had said that, I realized that what I wanted to do is I was tired of telling people how they should do things. I wanted to go do it myself. And that began the next phase, which was then going to work, but ultimately looking for what could happen. I started out with a client. I started out as internal auditor, had an internal audit department. We never did any internal auditing. There was a lot of acquisitions going on, so we needed all the accountants to figure out how to merge these acquisitions into the company. And then I got promoted from that to the chief financial officer of a subsidiary of this company, but it was a public company. And it had a mixed bag of product. I was there for about 3 years. Unfortunately, we had a very poor CEO. He was an alcoholic, even though he was a PhD in engineering. And so that company floundered, and I eventually left there. And then I got picked up by another company who had a division here in the West Coast in the manufacture of textiles, something I knew nothing about. Even though my education at Arthur Andersen had been very broad, textiles was totally new to me. I went into that company, I believe it was April of some year, I don't remember now, but they fired the president, and in August I became the president at the age of 39 years of age. So I had some grounding now to begin to think of other things. The product line was very difficult to handle. All the technicians that were in that business were back east. They had to import them out here to the West Coast. We had 2 plants and 2 other offices. We had almost 600 employees, and we weren't really doing very well. And I was really kind of concerned, since I spent most of my life in the financial arena, what do I do as the president of this company? After some investigation of my own, I decided that the weakness of the company was in marketing, something I hadn't been trained for, and in operations, also something I hadn't been trained for. But I knew that the operational part of the business was going to be second to the marketing side. And in investigating that, I found that there was lots of problems with the way they do business. It was different than in other industries. There was lots of favoritism that went on. There was difficulties with salespeople not being able to get into customers because they weren't liked. And so we had to break all of that down. So I developed some skills for the salespeople to do that, but we still had trouble in getting them to meet the competition. And then one day I had a brainstorm as I was driving to work, and the brainstorm had to do with how we made product for the customer. Excuse me. Usually the way they did it, they had 140-yard rolls of fabric, which was a new design. And so if you figure you've turned out 40 to 50 fabric designs, you need 40 or 50 rolls of fabric. You did that 4 times a year. Sometimes it was more than that, and they would take away a lot of production from the plant and slow the whole process down. And then if the line didn't turn out to be very good, then what do we do at that point? So what I did is I came up with this idea that we did not need 140-yard rolls of fabric, and they were pretty surprised at that, but it turned out it worked. And that finally told me that I knew what to do, because we then doubled our sales in 6 months, and that was really kind of enjoyable for everybody. The only problem we ultimately had was it was a double knit fabric made of polyester. You're probably not familiar with that, but at that time that was a big thing, and then the market for that collapsed within a year. So that changed things. So the next event I had was trying to find another role, and because I've been a president of a company for 3 years, that was much more difficult. And I got finally landed a responsibility in a company as the CFO instead of as the president. I started on a Monday. On Friday, I became the chief operating officer, and 2 weeks later, I was made the president because the company was really very sick. And 2 weeks after that, at my recommendation, we put the company into bankruptcy. This was a wholly owned subsidiary of a larger company. I became a debtor in possession. It's another thing you don't know about, but there's a lot of learning that goes on with that, learning how to handle creditors and so forth. And therefore, I think I got more education about managing organizations and doing it in a very difficult environment. The company's parent company tried to sell the company during that bankruptcy period. And after about 8 months, they bought it out of bankruptcy, came up with an idea that says, we're going to lower the price of the product, we're going to increase the volume of the product, and that's going to save the business. And I told them I didn't think that would happen, that what they would do would be spending a lot of cash, but they wouldn't move forward the business as much as they thought. Anyway, they tried it, they lasted for 60 days, the cash consumption was so great they had to give it up, and they decided to shut the business down. But before they decided to shut the business down, they said, if you can put a program together, we'll sell the business to you. And that was the beginning of the opportunity. This was December, and we wrote a business plan. I found a banker that would help us get started. The seller agreed to take certain notes and stock back. On January 1977, we started a business called Marco Manufacturing, which was in the fireplace business, or what we used to call the zero clearance fireplace business, which is now referred to as a factory engineered fireplace. Just to tell you a little bit how difficult to start was supposed to be, which it didn't turn out to be, was the product that we sold was what we call a low-profile fireplace. Today, the entire industry sells only low-profile fireplaces. At that time, they sold a different product which had a high dome. It was a replication of what a Main Street fireplace looked like. And it was very heavy, made of heavy gauge steel, whereas the one we had did something a little different. It used the air from the room, circulated around the fireplace, and went back in the room, so it was sort of like energy efficient. And the whole industry didn't think this thing would work. So when we came on the scene and got started, because I bought this product line from this company, they poo-pooed the whole thing and didn't think it was going to happen. At the time we were finishing off that business, we had already started a product development cycle in which we were trying to lower the cost of the fireplace. And so I worked with the engineer that headed up that project. It was a very small company, so we didn't have a lot of engineers, and the sales manager who understood the product very well. So simultaneously with the starting of the company in January of '77, at the end of that month, we introduced this new product. It was a lower cost product than anything on the market. And so we took all the prices of our competitors, lowered our price by $5, but our margins were so good that in the first year, my target was that we'd annualize our sales. Well, we started with about $1 million is what we inherited, and I wanted to be annualized sales of $5 million at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. And at the end of the first year, instead of annualized sales of $5 million, we had already done $5 million. And that's because of this new product that we engineered. The next year, the same thing continued on, and I thought, boy, this isn't this easy. I really enjoyed this part of it. And we continued going, but I knew we needed to have something to follow on. So we began talking about what we were going to do, and we came up with another idea about another fireplace, because at that time, which was at the end of the 70s, this would be 1978, there was a big oil embargo that went, if you remember that, and so there was high prices of oil, and the energy problem was really major. And so they were looking for things for how do you avoid using heating oil and find other methods to do that, which the fireplace was supposed to help them do. So we came up with a contraption that was a fireplace, looked like a fireplace, but it could take the air, store it, and then push it out and heat the room. Almost as good as a heater. Not quite as good, but almost as good. And we designed this thing paper first, and then had these ideas and put up some prototypes in the house. And then the sales guys were all excited about it, so they went out and tried to sell this thing beforehand. And the next news, we had orders for 2,000 units even before we had any on the production line. So when we started to try to produce this product, we found out we couldn't produce it because we didn't have enough tools to make it. And as a result, at the end of the year, at the end of 78 to 79, we were bloated with inventory trying to produce the product. And we're struggling to get the thing out. Simultaneously, with all of this going on, we had hyperinflation. Does anybody remember that? I don't think so. This was when Carter was president, and the inflation rate got up in 79 and 1980 to 18%. That was the prime rate. So since we were a borrower, our cost of money was so high that we needed our sales just to pay our interest costs. And so we fought for sales as hard as we could, but then they appointed Volcker as the Fed chairman. He came in, slammed the brakes on the credit so that they could lower inflation, but that stopped all of the construction industry in its tracks, because the construction industry lives on borrowed money. That's mortgages and all those other things you're familiar with. So in April of 1980, at the time of my anniversary, as it were, the whole thing came to a crashing halt. And at the same time as all of that happening, our controller, who had talked the banker into a liberal asset base for lending credit to us, that came to a screeching halt by the bank. They said, no, this was wrong. Somebody had given you the wrong information about what should be credit, except it was documented. And so they started changing that, and the next news, we were, in effect, over-borrowed, and we were in trouble. I wasn't sure what we were going to do at that time, but I had just enough conviction that they wouldn't let us sink, and so we worked with them as hard as we could for the next, about a year. And at the end of the year, we found another bank that came in and said, if your bank will do these things, we'll take you on because we think you can make this successful. And so that's what happened. And in that time, we started a whole new program and got the business off the ground again, using the same kind of products. In the meantime, one of our competitors copied our engineering idea about the fireplace, applied it to the chimney, and then came up with a lower cost chimney, so we were stuck chasing them now for becoming as cost efficient as they were. One of the things that I started the business with was to make sure that we have what I call the most aesthetically pleasing product in the market and still produce it at a low cost. So we strive for that for many years. After we got out of this predicament and we started up again, the business grew pretty fast. We went from about $10 or $11 million up to $16 million, and then we started pushing towards 20. But one of the fellows that I had started the business with, who was our operations guy, got into physical difficulties. We had to have a heart operation, so he resigned from the business. And so I decided at that point, since our sales guy wasn't as good as he needs to be, we'd go out and hire 2 people to replace these 2. So we hired a vice president of operations, and then we hired a vice president of marketing. And these 2 guys were very experienced, and they were supposed to contribute immensely to the business by bringing some sophistication to our small organization. The sales manager and the marketing guy did. He was a very professional guy, had done a great deal of marketing work around the world, principally in the Far East. And so he began a whole program of helping us do this in a way that would keep our costs down, but still get the growth of market share that we needed. One of the things I felt was that our salespeople were not really salespeople, that they were more like sales managers, because our customers were distributors who in turn sold the product to the building industry or to the developers. With that in mind, we made that work, and that meant that we had lower cost salespeople, or lower cost selling expense than we did to our competitors who flooded the market with salespeople. And this new marketing guy liked that idea and pushed that forward in a very good way. So in the next couple of years, we did very well. We grew, we made money, and so we then had to make the next step. And so we thought that what we could do to make the next step to sell across the United States would be to open up another plant, because some of our competitors had plants back east, which we did not, and their freight costs were a lot less than us, so we do that. So we opened up a plant in Kentucky, and we ran that plant for quite a while, about 4 years, until we again got into trouble. So one of the troubles we had with that plant was we did all the homework on designing that plant, making it look like it worked, and the one thing we forgot was we made an assumption that the freight costs would not be significant when they turned out to be significant. And so that was one of the backbreakers of that one. So after piling up a couple, 3 years of profitability, we ended up having this cost problem with the product, because we were shipping it back there, reassembling it, and then shipping it out again. And so our costs got out of control in that regard, so our profits began to disappear. We also then tried to develop an improved version of equipment for manufacturers of Chile. And that was another learning curve, because now we were going to embark on using a piece of equipment that was going to cost us $1 million. That was a lot of money for a piece of equipment, especially at that time. This piece of equipment was supposed to be able to turn out a huge quantity of product in a very short period of time. So what we were normally doing in 2 shifts, this machine was supposed to be able to do in about 7 hours a day. And so we looked at that as a way of cutting our costs. We embarked on that after a lot of research and so forth. And the problem, the thing I learned from that was the engineering companies that try to sell you this equipment sometimes don't give you all the facts all at the same time. And with this piece of equipment, they failed to let us know, although our engineers probably should have figured it out, that if one little part of the machine doesn't work, the whole thing comes crashing down, can't produce. And so we finally got the machine after about a year, it took to build it, and we started putting it into production and trying to run it, and sure enough, that's what happened. One part of it kept breaking down, the whole thing would shut down, and so our deliveries to our customers got to be a real problem. We had to carry lots of inventory, our costs went up, and so we had an immense amount of difficulty with that sort of thing. In that case, I think the operations manager was probably more involved than anybody else. He allowed his engineering group to get too big. They didn't produce. He never held them accountable. And so in our meetings, when we would talk about this stuff, everything would get kind of defensive. So there would be arguments about it. And then he decided he'd better leave. And that turned out to be a good idea, because now we were back in trouble with the bank again. This time we had to go through a workout with the creditors of the company. And so we went and arranged with our creditors to have payments over a period of time. We'd struggled with this for about 2 years, and we got them all paid off. And so we got the company back up and running to the point where it was doing much better. But we also had to invent some tools in order for this never to happen again. One of them was, interestingly enough, a unique, what I call P&L. I'm sure you've heard that. It's an income statement. This income statement was a little different than others. It used different kinds of controls in it called direct costs. We had definitions of what people could be in a particular department, how many there could be, and all that sort of thing, so that for years afterwards, the controls remained really quite good. So we would achieve running our business within 2 or 3% of our cost side. That's excluding the cost of materials for the product. Once we worked our way out of the dilemma that we had with our creditors, we had enough momentum going with the marketplace because our product kept getting improved over all this time, and we just honed it down to get it faster, cheaper, better, and better looking than our competitors, and that helped us build a market. But we still had the same old problem I told you about a few minutes ago, in which when the companies on the East Coast had a better advantage than we did. And also at that time, the housing market shifted from the Midwest and the West Coast to the East Coast, meaning more houses were being built back there than they were out here. So we then went back to the drawing boards and we developed a factory for the East Coast where we could knock it down after building it and putting it up. We could knock it down in 30 days and move it to another site. The object behind it was to be a flexible manufacturing operation. So we would produce all the parts here in Los Angeles. We'd ship the parts off to this facility. They made one part there in the new facility, which was a refractory. And then we could service the market there and achieve a better cost advantage. This worked. And we had that plant in Atlanta until we sold the business in '98. We also did some other things which helped us along the way. When we started, I told you we reduced the cost of the product. We also insisted that all of our fireplaces have a refractory liner which looked like brick and stone inside the fireplace on all 4 sides. This had been unheard of at that time, but we sold all of our product that way. All the other companies used heavy gauge metal and porcelainized steel on the sides except for the back and the floor of the fireplace. That pushed the competition into emulating us, and so in order to keep up with what we were doing. We also had to put glass doors on the fireplace, and before anyone else had come out with a set of glass doors, I hired an engineering firm to design a glass door for fireplaces where when you looked at the fireplace, you didn't see the glass doors, all you saw was the fire. So you looked through the door. That was sort of an interesting engineering idea, and we produced it, and then of course everybody copied it. So today, all factory engineered fireplaces, the 3 things we pushed are all present in 100% of the products that are produced. They're all low profile. Most of them are heat circulated. They all use glass doors like we invented, and they also use a refractory line fireplace. So that's what you see all of today. Our product then, therefore, got much more efficient after we had settled this product or credit problem with our creditors, and we began to grow the company larger and larger. There used to be sort of a parable that said that once you got to 25 million, it was very difficult to break through. And I must admit that for some time, we ran between 20 and 25 million. We had a hard time getting past 25 million. But then we did. We broke through the 25, and then went to 30, and then went to 35. And all of this time, of course, we were making profits, which was nice to have happen. This went on for a number of years. And then we also had some interesting marketing problems with distributors who would be quite fickle about who they would buy from, because they were always looking for some way to get an advantage over the manufacturers. So they would either carry 2 product lines, 3 product lines, or tell you that they would carry your product line when they were promoting the other product lines. There was lots of those things that went on, and so we created little rules and whatnot to prevent that. But in California, that got to be a very big problem because California is the largest housing starts market in the United States. If you don't get the market here in America, in California, then you're really going to suffer. I decided, I should say, that what we would do is, in California only, we would buy distributors and set up our own distribution network. And in 1996, I think it was, we bought the first one. By the end of the year, we had purchased 5. And then the early next year, we got 2 more. And so we had a network of distributors up and down the state of California. We got them organized, and even though when we put it all together, they were losing money, it didn't matter so much because they were consuming a lot of our product. And so in a short order, this distribution network was installing and shipping out the largest number of fireplaces in the entire United States as a distributor. They were doing much better than 25,000 fireplaces a year. And that gave us the dominant market share in California, which is where our home base was, and so we were quite happy with that, much to the chagrin of our competitors. When that happened, the sales of the company got to $50 million and then over $50 million, and then we became a big candidate for people who might want us. In 1997, there was a consolidation that began. Some Canadian company came down to the United States and began buying up fireplace manufacturers and created a big company. And then another company went ahead and did something similar to that, so I was faced with the notion of being the largest, to compete with these large manufacturers, of doing the same thing myself, and that was something I wasn't sure I wanted to do, because I've been at this now for 21 years, I think it was. And I decided that maybe the better thing to do would be to sell, which happened to also coincide with the fact that the stock market was at the highest level that it had been in history. And so we began the prospect of hiring an investment banker, and then 3 months after we did that, we put the company up for sale, started sending out the books, and we thought our competitors would come and buy us, because if they bought us, since we were the largest selling manufacturer to the new construction industry, that would certainly make them the biggest fireplace company in the United States for certain. And one of them came in, made a proposal, an economic proposal, and then decided not to do it, but they sent the benchmark for what the price of the company was going to be. And then some other companies came in. The biggest one was Lennox International, which you may not know, and they decided to purchase us. So in that short little story, I told you what happened to the company, and it got sold in 1998, and then I retired. The benefit of what Fred wanted me to convey was the fact that there's more than one way to create wealth, rather than just trying to invent a new PC or a new MP3 or whatever it is. There's lots of opportunity out there. You just have to have the open mind that it exists. And you don't need to have millions of dollars to get started, but you do need to have some grounding in what you're going to be able to do. So you need to learn a craft, and get that craft under your belt so that you're very good at it, and then after that you can move forward with any entrepreneurial approach you would like to have. That's the end of my short remarks.
Yep, but I'm pause just for a moment and introduce his wife Sheila up there, and his very good friend Mr. Carrigian. Mr. Carrigian, the handsome folks. Raise your hands so they know who they are.
I knew him when he didn't have any money.
Hey, the problem I had to have you guys raise your hand because you both look just as young as all my students. Good. I want to tell you something. I made some notes here while he was talking, and I didn't have any paper, so I made them on a dollar bill here, and that's a pretty good way to talk about an entrepreneur and everything. A couple of points I want to make to you, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. A couple of things I want you to understand. What he said here is how many of you guys, we teach ethics and social responsibility here. How many of you guys, if confronted with the situation that he described in Arthur Anderson, would have the guts to say, I'm not going to sign that because it's not right? When you know your career is going to go flying out the window, you're going to face decisions like this, you're going to face times like this, you're going to face tough stuff like that. Remember, the guts he had to do it. And that makes me very happy. Another thing, I always say to you guys, failure happens. You're not, so many of us when we're young think, oh yeah, I'm graduating next week. Yes, I'm going to go out and get my first job. By the end of the year, I'll be making 100,000. Second year, 200,000, 400, 800, 39,000 or 39 million the first decade. You're going to go, whoop, whoop. I always tell you guys, life is a roller coaster. He had wonderful, magnificent failures, and I love to make sure they know that. It wasn't easy. You build it up, got kicked in the teeth, went down a little bit, build it up some more, got kicked in the teeth, went down a little bit, always fought back, always fought back. Solved the problems that caused him difficulties. Never forget that. It's a tough game out there. The guys that win are the guys that say, oh, hey, that's an interesting, tough situation. I go to work, find the solution. This is a guy that's a master at it. Listen and remember to what he said. And let's see if I got any more notes on here. Oh yeah, the final one is you think you're running a business and anything you do is going to work. The external things that happen to you that you can't control can wipe you out. You heard him talk about, oh, and then the market went to hell. Oh, and then the dollar went up to here. And you haven't lived, and I went through that era too. You live till the cheapest interest rate you can get on a loan is 18%. I had clients that were taking loans out for 25%. What that does to a business is devastating. Those things are going to hit you. Just the minute you think you're on top of the world, something's going to kick you in the teeth. Never forget that and never give up. Always remember this guy as a guy who fought through all these difficulties and became wonderfully, wonderfully successful. Because that's one of the most wonderful things you can ever learn. Now, we'll have questions for Michael. Yes, sir.
Actually, Dr. Kiesner kind of ruined the question there about talking about...
You should see what I did to your grade.
He was talking about, like, as an entrepreneur, you had your ups and downs. Was there any point when you kind of looked at yourself and was like, am I doing the right thing? Or if you ever doubted yourself to get out of what you were doing? And if so, what kept you going?
Well, I would say that most of the time I doubted myself. I've always tried to keep a very open mind that I wasn't the cure-all best, had all the answers on myself. So, but I always did it in the way that I did the research to figure out how it was. I can't tell you how much research I did on my own. I'll tell you a cute one. I thought it was kind of cute when I finally discovered it. Whenever companies get into trouble, you hear the management start yelling, okay, we got to cut costs, and we're going to start saving paper clips, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. We've got to cut all the spending, the cash spending of the company. And of course, when I got into trouble, I started thinking about doing that, and then I decided, well, I think I'll be more analytical about it. I was going to analyze where the cash went, what we were spending it on. And so I made a huge analysis, and come to find out the so-called discretionary spending, you hear the government use that term, by the way, but the discretionary spending only turned out to be about 2% of the revenues. So that fancy P&L I mentioned to you, we had a little line that in effect said miscellaneous spending or discretionary spending, and if that number went over 2%, I was all over it. And if it went down to 1 3/4%, I was satisfied. If it went down to 1.5%, I was delighted. But then I didn't have to worry about the paper clips and all the other little nuances that went on. But did I doubt? Yeah, I doubt. But I went to work to get rid of the doubt.
Doubt lasts about 10 seconds, and then you go to work to fix it. Good. Okay.
How did you keep your alliance with basically with the business partnership with the construction companies that were building the houses? And how did you make sure that you kept on top of the new construction and fireplace installment of your projects?
I think that you're asking a marketing question.
I want to repeat it, by the way, so the other guys
You wanted to know how we kept track of what was going on in the construction industry. Is that what, is that?
Actually, I wanted to know how you guys managed to keep above the competitors in that area and how you managed to keep number one for all those years. I mean, there had to be, it's obviously good marketing, but there had to be.
It was good marketing. I concluded, that was another little research project I did. One of the research projects I did was what happens when you lower the price, which is one of the typical things you get in a competitive environment. Well, if you follow that through logically, you get to the point of no return. You get to the point where if everybody lowered the price and continued to lower the price, nobody would make any money. So that didn't make any sense. So you had to be able to sell your product where you had a decent margin to create a bottom line. And the way you do that is you create an aura about your product, a perception that this is the product you want, and you give it, and you do it by having great customer service, quality product at a reasonable price. And so when we began to be able to control all of that, and we had great customer service, and our service, by the way, got to the point where we beat our competitors all the time. And in our case, service meant, because this was a modular product, and we sold it by truckloads, the order that the customer sent, he wanted exactly what he ordered. And most of our competitors were not capable of doing that. We got it to the point where we could ship within 4 days of the order. Our competitors couldn't do that. And we shipped it complete. That is, what they ordered is what they got. And when we got to that point, then our competitors had a hard time fighting us because that's like punching smoke. You know, they either had to match it or, and the quality was also important. The best day of my life in the business was when the biggest and oldest manufacturer in the industry said, my product is as good as Mike Ricci's. And I knew I had a great product.
Yes, sir. One last question, and I know a lot of you guys have class at 7. Go ahead.
What are some of the techniques you've found to work in hiring and also in motivating some of the employees around?
That's an excellent question.
Y'all hear it? Techniques in hiring and motivating the employees?
Well, the first thing is you need to define very clearly what you're hiring for. I would say most people don't do that, but you really need to make a very clear definition. So I developed a little form called the job specification sheet, in which we answered 3 major questions. What is this job all about? What skills does this person have to have? And what do they have to accomplish? And so if you're very realistic about putting that together, and you put it in the format of major and minor, what's really important and what's not quite so important. And don't make it a laundry list so it's 3 pages long. Then you at least now define what you're really looking for. Once you get the definition of what you're really looking for, then you can start interviewing for people who supposedly fill this. And of course, now you're looking for people who have integrity, that you're hearing what you're supposed to hear. And then after that, it's about 50-50 at best.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mike to stay up here for a few minutes afterward. Anyone wants to come up and say hello to him or congratulate him on how gorgeous his